Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Some would say he's a rarity in Washington, a Republican who is willing to publicly stand next to Democrats on issues to which they both agree, a fiscal conservative who uses part of his salary to pay down the nation's debt and does not accept federal health care or retirement benefits. He's an entrepreneur, congressional reformer, and champion of veterans' rights. He's Congressman Scott Rigell, and he's my very special guest here on Another View, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. I hope that you are dry and that you're driving today through all the puddles in Hampton Roads was a safe one. The weather folks promise us that by 2 o'clock it should be all sunshine, so hopefully that will work. You may recall a previous Another View program when we talked with African Americans who aligned themselves with the Republican Party. It was Another View of African American voters, a group most associated with the Democratic Party. The fact is just 2% of African American voters are Republican, and there's been a lot of talk among the GOP on how to get those numbers up. My guest today may have some thoughts on this subject and many others. Please welcome to Another View Congressman Scott Rigell, representing Virginia's 2nd District. Congressman, I am so honored that you're here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm thrilled. I really am, and I appreciate the opportunity to catch up with you and have a conversation, not only with you, but of course the listeners as well.
Absolutely.
About the challenges and the opportunities that are facing not only our region, but our country. Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked about this a long time, so we finally got it done.
Yes,
it's good.
We finally got a chance to get together. So let's start with that. What is the GOP doing? What is the Republican Party doing to attract all minorities, but particularly African Americans?
Well, let me first say that, state what's really obvious is that our country's, I think, at a rough spot right now. The gridlock that has taken hold of Washington is dimming the light and the future of every American, regardless of their background, economic background, ethnicity, geographically. And so I start out with a basic premise that we can and must do better. I also hold the view that as I read, for example, the Virginia Republican Creed, if I read it to you today, and I could find it here, I haven't quite memorized it, but the principles that are espoused there, I truly believe, Barbara, are best for all Americans. And that includes, of course, the African American community. So if properly applied, that's an important caveat there, if properly applied and expressed, because if you will, I believe in our product, if you will, that I think there's a natural appeal. Now, human nature being what it is, we kind of tend to associate with one group or another. But if I look back at the human rights legacy of the Virginia, the Republican Party, going back to President Lincoln and all throughout, we have a proud heritage on this and an expanding opportunity for African Americans. It's been imperfect at times, but yet so is the Democratic Party.
Well, and for a long time, African Americans were predominantly Republican. I mean, back in
the
way
whole
back
thing
in
is
the day,
flipped.
It's flipped completely.
It has flipped completely. But the main thing I think, look, what's important, I think, to not only African Americans but all Americans are wonderful job opportunities and a good education for our children. And I'm ready to talk about those topics and walk through and have folks make an objective assessment of it. But I do extend a warm and sincere invitation to not only consider what the party has to offer, but also to come on in and help us.
You know, when we did that show where we had some African Americans on, we had the president of the Norfolk Republican Party on with us. And one of the complaints was that people aren't going to where the minority is. in order to reach out. In other words, to explain what's going on. So do you see an increase in that?
Oh my
do you
gosh.
think?
Well, not enough. But here's what I've experienced. And as you know, my background is in business. And if you would have told me some time ago that I'd be sitting here as a representative, I couldn't have believed it. It wasn't on the bucket list of life. But what I've learned over the last several years is that as it relates to the Republican Party, is that the number of people who are in the party who are actually, they say they want to expand the party, but you have to actually demonstrate it. And I think to your point, just physically, literally showing up is the most practical expression of concern. It's one thing to say that I care.
Exactly.
But we show up. You just mentioned earlier Shannon Kendrick, our wonderful district director. If I can't be somewhere, she is. And Terry and I, my wife of 32 years, who has been such a blessing and is a blessing to me, not every weekend, but a lot of weekends we'll worship in different churches of worship, oftentimes African-American churches. And what a privilege it is. I've learned so much. And Barbara, look, I think, you deal with reality here, and I do too, okay, in my service. You know what I've learned is oftentimes the sermons are different in African-American churches. The life experience is different. And so that perspective, it's helpful for me to have it, but it all comes back to a couple of things. Job opportunities for all and educational opportunities for our children. And as I said, I'm looking forward to unpacking all this over the next hour.
Okay, so on your website, you say that your number one focus is jobs. So at this point, what are you doing to make some more jobs for this area?
You couldn't have tossed me a slower softball than that. First of all, I think I have some credible basis to speak to it. The first jobs that I created were, there are two of them, Barbara. One is I hired Terry and she hired me. We started a cleaning business when I was about 22, 23 years old, frankly, because we had a little more going out at the end of the month than we had coming in. And the only way to bridge that gap was to start our own cleaning business. And we cleaned at night, and she cleaned new residences, and I cleaned a commercial building. So I kind of get that. The biggest opportunity I think we have here locally, and I've already shared this with a large group this morning. I did yesterday. Every day, I guess I really am in the sales business. I'm selling the idea that we need to go from 3 legs to 4 legs on the stool that supports our local economy. We know what the 3 are: tourism, the port, and also our military. And all 3 of those need to be strengthened, elevated, and advanced. Now, that said, they're not sufficient on their own. We're going to continue to see compression on our military budget, so that's going to be difficult to expand. The port, we're doing a good job. I like what I'm seeing from Governor McAuliffe and others about really getting the port going. And tourism will continue to be a stable source. But I'm suggesting that we add a 4th, and it's this: the environmentally responsible opening and the proper exploration and harvesting of the amazing resources that we have off Virginia's coast, the energy that's there, the natural fuels that are there, oil and gas, and they can be responsibly harvested. The job creating potential is tremendous. The best estimate we have is 25,000 local jobs. These are really good paying jobs. I've been down to Louisiana at the Port Fourchon area. I led a bipartisan delegation down there. And they are so proud of their schools, their healthcare systems, their roads and their bridges, because they have the tax revenues that are needed to make the investments in those things. And only 15% of America's coastline is open to exploration. And I'm suggesting, and I'm in agreement, and I'm happy to say this, with Governor McAuliffe, Senator Warner, Senator Kane, in opening up Virginia's coast to unlock that tremendous job-creating potential that's really needed.
So what's the holdup? What do you think is the holdup?
Well, I know exactly what the holdup is. Right now, through the Department of Interior, there is a full moratorium on the east coast of Florida, well, not only Florida, but also Mid-Atlantic. And so I've advanced through the House of Representatives legislation that would open that up. We didn't get it through the Senate, but actually, in all candor, the administration could do this. And so we're working with, at every opportunity, trying to convince not only the Secretary of Interior, but indeed the President himself, that this is wise and this is right and this is good. I want to partner with the president and anyone else who wants to create jobs. And I think he's sincere in his interest in this. That said, I do see a real, and it's an irrefutable impediment. It's there. We can't advance. But we're making some progress. I'm hearing more and more from local community leaders. They're open to this idea. Because, Barbara, how many regional seminars have you gone to? I've gone to over the last 25 years where we'd hear Dr. Cook, for example, former president of ODU, and he'd say, now, look, we're too dependent on military. We need to expand and diversify our economy. But what happens next? That is often not anything of real substance was able to be advanced. And I am convinced to my core that this is the right thing to do, and it will help our young people when they get out of Booker T High School or Cox or anywhere else to have the opportunities they need.
So how do you balance then? Dominion Power just put out a $42 million grant to build 2 wind turbines off the coast of Virginia Beach. Then you have environmentalists who say, no, you will ruin the bay, you will ruin the Atlantic.
Well, I start out with this basic foundational principle. When I'm working through any challenge or any issue, whether it's this or Medicare or Afghanistan or you name the topic, I first try to say, what are the foundational principles that should guide me in this decision? And after those are identified, then what are the relevant facts that would be applied to those? And then what are the options that are before us? Listen to good counsel from all sides and then make a decision. The foundational guiding principle that drives me is this. We have a moral obligation, Barbara, to leave our children with clean air and clean water and clean soil. And I mean that. That we're entrusted with it for a certain period of time. And we not only need to give it to our children in the condition we found it, but indeed better. The bay is not in an acceptable place. We've made a lot of progress, but we can do more. So I respectfully, let's put it this way, I respectfully refuse to be put in a box of either grow jobs or protect the environment.
Because you say we can do both.
Yes, I believe this. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
More often than not, what's pointed to is the Macondo tragedy, and indeed it was, the Deepwater Horizon, the tragedy off the coast of Louisiana. Now, where I visited was right there at the epicenter of that. These are the folks that experienced it real time. Their livelihood was, at stake. We have learned, we as the American people, industry, government, the president was right in saying that that there was not proper oversight there. We have learned from this, Barbara, and now everything is pre-positioned. I was stunned and frankly angry, and that's not often something that I like to say that I am, but when they were saying that we had drilled, opened up a hole in the Earth's crust here, and we didn't know how to cap it if something went sideways, I have a problem with the company and the leadership that allowed that to happen. So did the president. But we've learned from that. And I saw all the technology. And I'll give you one quick analogy here. If we have a catastrophic airline failure, the loss, the burden, you grieve with these families. But what do? We investigate. They reconstruct planes if they can get to them. We learn and we build in the improvements, the lessons learned. And that's why you and I can go down to Norfolk International, get on any flight, and feel good about it. I mean, it's never been safer despite the increase in traffic.
I was going to say, and despite the things like the 2 airlines that almost ran into each other today. But that's another story.
Yeah, but we can learn from these things. Yeah. And I've seen, in my own family, I had 3 children that sailed through college. You couldn't stop them. Have one child chose, for all the right reasons, to go more of a trade route, trades. And we need employment for all. And I've been down there, the starting wage, this is amazing. It's true. The starting wage for someone on the trades path, I mean, just without like a full master electrician or anything, regular like a 19, 20-year-old, $60,000.
That's good money.
It's really good money. And then 4 years later, the average wage is $100,000. Now, there's all of these high-tech jobs, the ones that require our STEM type of education, that are there as well, that are running this sophisticated equipment. But all of these business people, they'd be the first to say they've got a funny little drawl and a little accent, but they said, everybody thinks we're down here just, with the alligators and everything, but we're down here really prospering, and they want to share this with you. So we're going to have a delegation from Louisiana come here, and I'm also organizing another delegation of local business and community leaders to go down to Louisiana to see firsthand the opportunity. I'm really convinced this could be good for our economy.
So then where do you stand on the whole idea of raising the minimum wage? I mean, yesterday there were all these protests all over the country for higher wages and so forth. What's your position?
All right. Let's look at this. I am an employer, and it's not really theoretical to me. Although I hadn't looked, but I doubt that we have anybody actually literally making minimum wage at the company that I have the privilege to have. But what I've said is this: we certainly ought to raise it to just reflect the inflation that's occurred since it was last adjusted. And I think that this is common ground. That'd be around $8 an hour. Now, it's also true, if you look at the best estimates from the Congressional Budget Office, that raising it to a full $10.10. Now, Barbara, when I make a point that maybe, some might say they might object to it, look, all I'm saying is what the data is and what the facts are. The estimate is that it cost, if you raised it right up to 1010, that it'd cost about 1 million jobs. Now, that's not a Scott Rigell figure. That's not some partisan Republican. It's the Congressional Budget Office that really is widely respected as an objective third party.
Right, exactly.
I really don't hear members on either side really objecting to that. I think about what Warren Buffett...
If 1010 is not right, then why can't there come a compromise on a lower number? I mean, is it $9?
Well, $8 sounds pretty good to me. But see, the logic of that would be this. All that does is reflect inflation. See, and I think that's more palatable. You'll get some on the hard right that'll object to pretty much anything. And we've had some on the left, if you will, if we want to just make it simple, that are calling for $15 an hour and all that. I'm mindful of what Warren Buffett said, widely respected. He said, look, if it was that easy just to raise it to $15 an hour and, raise everybody's standard of living, we do that, but that's not how it works. So I'm hopeful that which has been so elusive in Washington can be advanced, and that is a principled compromise, not a compromise in principle.
Right.
And that distinction,
yes.
There is a profound difference, but without some degree of compromise, not only on this issue, but the range of issues facing our country, we're going to be bound to not doing anything. And not doing anything, sometimes that's the right thing, but not now on all these issues.
And I want to follow up on that point, but I want to invite our audience to join us. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. If you have a question for Congressman Scott Rigell, give us a call now, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So the 113th Congress has been dubbed the No Action Congress, the Get Nothing Done Congress, the Do Nothing Congress. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. Yes. There have been one or two things that I think have been good for our country, and let me start with that because I am an inherently positive person. The agreement, the Ryan Murray agreement that was reached at the end of last year, this provided 2 consecutive years of certainty in funding and on the budgeting, certainly on the budgeting side and most likely on the funding side as well. This is what our top military leaders have been calling for, both on the civilian side and on the uniform side, because this roller coaster and these horrific, the shutdown and the continuing resolutions, this really harms our country in a direct way. The cloud of uncertainty keeps investors, entrepreneurs from wanting to invest in their business. They're just not sure, and it causes regular Americans, hardworking Americans, to maybe not purchase. So when I came home in December, it's really the best that I felt in 3 years. Now, if you'd like, Barbara, we can go into kind of why that's the case. Why the gridlock. That's the good thing, but overall, it's a tough spot, and I could start to unpack that if you'd like as to what's causing it.
But one of the questions I have then, because you did an editorial recently,
yes,
where you talked about the president staying in his lane,
yes,
in terms of executive decision making versus legislative decision making, and I guess my question is how. If we can't get it done through the Congress, then what other option does he have? Or do we just say we're not going to fix anything?
No, fair question. Let's start out with what I think is absolutely common ground, and that is both the respect for and adherence to our Constitution. That is in some ways separate and aside, to the extent that it can be segregated here, separate and aside from the question of policy, advancing specific policy. But whoever is in the White House, and I tried to make this point, and there's almost such a assumption of if you're critiquing the other side, you're doing it from a partisan standpoint. It's really difficult to make a point and not have it be perceived as just partisan. And I thought that's why Professor Turley, Jonathan Turley's comments were so relevant, because he supports the president outright. And he is a respected constitutional scholar. In fact, he said, I actually want all of these programs the president wants to be advanced. But he said, I'm deeply troubled and I object to the fact that he has circumvented, in the professor's view, and in my view as well, the restraints, the wise restraints on where the president should be. Here's what I would respectfully submit and suggest to the President of the United States. More direct engagement. And look, and I say this with full acknowledgement that the Republican Party and the House has got some issues. And I can go into that as time permits. But I've actually heard from Democratic members who are friends of mine to say, the president really isn't engaging us as much as we'd like. I think that the key is a proactive engagement, literally meeting with. I'd love to not to go see the White House. No, I've been there, but more. I'd like for him to invite 10 or 12 of us over.
So that exchange is not happening.
No, truly, Barbara, it is not. And I'm hearing from my Democratic colleagues that it really isn't happening on that side. But look, the point here is not to look. Leadership is not just pointing at the other guy and saying you got an issue. So that's not what I'm doing here. I think that what we need to do in the House, I feel really good about a lot of the job-creating bills, and I really see them as such. It does concern me that what I'm seeing in the Senate is a lack of a reciprocal approach. That is, if they don't like a particular bill, oftentimes what Senator Reid will do is he'll just say, dead on arrival. I've seen him at the podium, dead on arrival. Well, I think it's incumbent upon the Senate to say, well, we don't like that, but we're going to pass our bill, the mirror bill, and then the mirrors that, and then we're going to go to conference. That's what's not happening in Washington. That's called regular order. I didn't even know really what that meant. Look, I was just a hardworking business person, husband, father, grandfather, going about life, knew something was wrong up there. But now that I've gotten in the middle of it, I'm immersed in it, this business of regular order is very important. I've critiqued the Republican side for going on recess when we've not passed all of our bills. And here's what I was told. Well, Scott, by some senior leadership, Scott, if we pass these bills, they're just going to sit in the Senate. And my rebuttal to that is, I can't feel good about going home to Virginia 2, this incredible district that I have the privilege to serve, unless I know that we've done our job. And then I can say, look, we've passed all 12 appropriations bills on time, and they're sitting there in the Senate. Oftentimes, especially last year, we'd go home only having passed 5 out of the 12. And that's an abdication of our duty. So both sides need to kind of get it
come together.
Yes.
We've got the phones are lit up.
Oh, good.
Let's go to Judy in Virginia Beach. Hi, Judy. You're on the air.
Yes, hello. This is Judy. Thank you. I did vote for you last time, and I have been concerned about the Do Nothing Congress. I was wondering how you thought the election was going to shape up. I understand a Democrat has filed to run against you. I wonder what your thoughts were about re-election. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Judy. The wisdom of our founding fathers, and I would also say under the direct influence of our founding mothers as well, that we're up for re-election every 2 years. and it does seem to come around real quick. It really does. I do think that it's good for Americans to have a choice, and I'll put it this way: I've actually not met my Democratic opponent. I look forward to doing so. Just our paths just haven't crossed. But we're going to do everything that we can so that when the polls close at 7 p.m., and this is how I've always looked at it, is that I'll do everything that I can to ensure that at 7 p.m. when the polls close, that I know that I've done all that I could, and then I can rest in whatever the outcome is.
So in reading the tea leaves, though, on a national basis,
okay,
do you think that the Senate is going to turn over?
I think,
and do you think the House will maintain?
I'd say, look, my guess is no better than anyone else's, I'd think, but I think there's probably a 55, little bit better than 50% chance that it will flip to a Republican side. I think the likelihood of the House being maintained a majority by the Republicans is an almost certainty. You can't say certainty in politics. Who knows? But statistically, if you just look at the numbers of how many seats they'd have to win and these things, I think it'd be quite difficult. That's probably where we are. But I think one point needs to be made here. I think we need more districts like Virginia, too, which is a competitive district. Because hyper-gerrymandered districts that we have allowed as the American people have hurt our country. See, America is not as divided as Congress. And I take some hope in this. And it's one of the explanatory factors, if you will, as to why it's so dysfunctional up there. It's because we've kind of bifurcated ourselves here into hyper D districts favorable to a Democratic incumbent and hyper Republican districts favorable to a Republican incumbent. That's done through redistricting, and we need to revisit that.
Okay. If you're just joining us, we're talking one-on-one with Congressman Scott Rigell, who represents the 2nd District in Virginia, which includes Virginia Beach, the Eastern Shore, and parts of Norfolk, Hampton, and Newport News. Dwayne joins us from Portsmouth. Hi, Dwayne. You're on the air.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was wondering how the representative stands on the fact that if Virginia were to opt into the enhanced Medicaid, wouldn't that injection of money raise the employment in Virginia?
Thanthis for the call, Dwayne. We appreciate that.
Yeah, this is a good question to wrestle with, Dwayne. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. This isn't dodging the question, but I think it's important for us to note that the question of whether Medicaid is expanded in Virginia or not, that indeed is a state issue to be addressed, and I trust that it will be addressed by the General Assembly and the governor, and that it won't result in real gridlock. I think I don't want Richmond to catch the cold or the flu that Washington has in this respect. We've got to watch that, and I hope they're able to avoid that.
Speaking, because along those same lines, now that the first enrollment period for the Affordable Care Act has passed, and it is law, what are your feelings now? I know that you coined the phrase the Unaffordable Act. Is that your still feeling, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that that I truly believe that we could have gone a different and better path. To start out with the premise that reform was needed, that's common ground right there. And my default position when starting a conversation is, what do we agree on? It's so easy to identify that which you
don't agree on.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some things that we agree on. The portability. Well, actually, there's not enough of that. But the fact that someone could stay on the insurance till age 26. I know that my own son is better off because of that. The inability of an insurance company to not deny coverage because of a pre-existing condition. That too is common ground. But I think, Barbara, if I had to sum it up, and I don't know if anybody else puts it this way, but frankly, the enormity of it, the grasp of it, the depth and the breadth of it that truly couldn't have been even understood. I remember when then Speaker Pelosi said, well, we've got to pass it to understand what's in it. Just as a from a management perspective, as a person who's led private sector and organizations and led organizations through change, I'm thinking, this is not good. we should have advanced incremental improvements.
Can we fix it now, from your perspective?
Well, if the collective will is present both in the House and the Senate and with the President to say, I would like to go in a different direction, and really, truly, fundamentally a different direction. I mean, but
so you'd rather kind of throw this out and put something else in?
But I deal with reality.
Okay. Barbara,
and the reality is that, to your point, it's law. And I've said this to my friends and everybody else. And, that bizarre, painful, was it 16 days, I think the federal government was shut down. The first day, I sat in my office, and this shows you the power of new media. We issued a tweet that morning. This was a rough day when the government shut down. And I said to our comms person, Kim, I said, look, tweet this, that we fought the good fight. It's time to reopen the government and pass a clean CR. Because I knew that, as the House of Representatives, we're 1/2 of 1/3 the federal government, and it wasn't the collective will of the American people to unwind it.
You took some heat from your own party for that, though, didn't you?
I did, but I think there's a benefit of being 53 years old and kind of knowing what you know. And I don't mean this in a callous indifferent, and that I'm callous and indifferent to criticism. No, I try to listen to that's being said, but I know this, that Washington is broken, and that the best thing I can do for this incredible district is to truly, and this is not just rhetoric here, but it's to put what's best for our country ahead of all else. And I think about how I was raised by my 92-year-old Iwo Jima veteran father, who's doing great. But it was drilled into me to love my country and to sacrifice. And look, I've never been called. You said, Scott, you served. I said, well, I served 6 years in the Marine Corps Reserve. Parris Island will shape you. But I've never experienced the amazing sense of sacrifice that our Gold Star families have experienced, those who've lost a loved one, or those that I've met who have been damaged, disfigured mentally, or post-traumatic stress disorder. You just look back at the sacrifice that's been made in this country to correct the wrong. Look at the sacrifice made by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the price that's paid. It is not easy to keep a republic in the center of the channel. And but it takes people, and I'm not submitting I'm one of them. I'll let others wrestle with that. But I seek in all that I do to think what's best for our country, respect for adherence to our Constitution, and that's why I respectfully and firmly object to the 39 different times the president has kind of circumvented what I think is clear in the Affordable Care Act or Unaffordable Care Act, changing all the target dates and everything. I was saying, and I believe now, that he truly didn't have the authority to do that. But that's the challenge of our time, is to sometimes disagree over these things, but find the common ground and advance that.
And take it from there. I want to talk to you about your Veterans Initiative and what's going on. But let's take a call first from Jeff, who joins us from Emporia. Hi, Jeff. You're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, you're on the air.
Yes. My name is Jeff. You want this? And I'm calling because I wanted to know how he felt, what's his stance on convicted felons. My story is, back 20 years ago, I was a convicted felon, spent a year in prison for basically driving without a license, not paying my fine. So that suspension led to me getting a year in prison, no drugs or alcohol. Well, 20 years later, I'm a federal contractor, but it was years in the making, and there are a lot of tax-paying ex-cons out there that are good people, but they're labeled as, just like they're killers or whatever.
Okay,
so,
Jeff, we got your point, and I really appreciate the call. Let's let the congressman answer.
It's a great question, and I believe in this, Jeff. I believe in grace. And I know, as flawed as I am, that's a good thing. And I believe in restoration. And I can tell you this, Jeff, that the best indicator of what a person believes is what, not so much what they're saying, but what they have done and what they are doing. And I know in our own business that we've made a judicious and thoughtful decision to hire folks that have had that type of background. And now you do have a duty to your fellow colleagues to make sure that someone you're bringing into the work environment is suitable for the work and all of that. But I've had so many come up to me, and one gentleman with tears in his eyes, thanking me for the opportunity that we gave him, even though he had the record that not unlike the one that you just mentioned. And I also want to point out that I'm really proud of my friend, former Governor Bob McDonnell. He really led in this. As a Republican, if you will, not that that's relevant, it really isn't relevant, but I know Bob, and he's a good man, and he actually led this in Virginia and restored more. I don't have the facts memorized, but he really moved on this.
Actually, yeah, because in that community of restoration of rights and so forth, that they say that Governor McDonnell was the most active.
He was
governor for a long time.
You see, if you take away hope from a man or a woman, if there's no path that someone can see, look, this is not a good thing. They need to be able to, provided all the changes there on the inside and then also on the outside, and the actions are there. If you do something wrong, you need to be punished. That needs to be present. But at the same time, we've got to let people get back on their feet, or what? We'll end up with them finding no way to find employment. And then where that perhaps could lead, and it's not good.
Exactly. Let's see. Anita joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Anita. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you very much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I'm so appreciative for the fact that we could hear our representatives' views. So I thank you for that. However, on the minimum wage issue, I'm astonished that we're still having a debate about $8 or $10.10 an hour. All you have to do is the math. The living wage in Tidewater is $14.80 an hour. That's the living wage. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's a human issue. Think about it that way. Thank you for your time.
Anita,
thank you, Anita, for the call. Well
stated. Let me give you another perspective to wrestle with here just a little bit. In my business career, again, going back to our first business, which was a cleaning business, I've printed statements, and I've had statements that have black at the bottom. That's a good thing. That means that you actually made a little money. I've printed statements that have red at the bottom, or the numbers in a bracket. And I can tell you that the feeling that can overcome you, as much as you can be elated with when you're in the black and you're making money, versus when you see those brackets, you start to multiply that by 12, and you think it scares you. It's a scary thing. I've been through it. I've had both emotions, if you will. I've had a banker tell me, "No, Scott, I can't help you because your business is not doing well." It's a sobering place to be. And, well, for example, Anita, and I know I don't think you'll have the opportunity to respond, but let's say, for example, you have a 19-year-old really with no skill set, and it will really take that person 3-4 months to even get to where they can really make a contribution to your company, the training that's required and all of these things. It is an inescapable fact. I think this is true. I really do. Is that when you raise the cost of wages and you raise the cost of the goods that you're selling, sometimes, that can be passed along and you can find savings in another area, but sometimes it can't. And so I do believe in a minimum wage. I don't think that ought to be, we ought to go back to where it was before 1932 or whenever. It's a good thing. It's right and proper, but I'd submit that keeping track with inflation is probably the best thing for us to do right now.
Okay. The veterans issue, because we know that you love our veterans here in this
Yes,
area.
we all do, I
and
think.
You've done a lot to make sure that the ships stay here and so forth. So I'm curious about your thoughts on what's going on now with Eric Shinseki.
Shinseki, yeah,
Shinseki.
General
Shinseki.
Shinseki.
Yes, and the accusations that the VA is holding back.
Well, we have a high, and I'd say submit the highest obligation to our men and women who have served to honor the commitments that have been made to them. And I would say a special measure of care is we should set aside for those who have been actually injured in combat. Mm-hmm. Now, the allegations against the VA are very, very serious. There are allegations that these deficiencies literally led to the deaths of veterans. Now, it's been my practice, not only in Washington, but in my private sector world, to just hold back a little bit. Let's make sure we're not responding emotionally. Let's get the facts. That's where we are. There's an Inspector General report that is due out
in a couple of weeks.
Yes,
right?
And I have stated, and I believe this is the best approach, and that is that we wait for that, because that's about as an objective assessment as we can possibly get. I will say that the sum of all things. I had a full day. I was not able to watch the Senate testimony, but the sum of all things, it does make it increasingly more difficult for the benefit of the doubt to be shifted to the good general. But let's be clear, he is an American patriot, and he is deserving of respect. And I know that his heart, his mind, and everything in his professional capability is devoted to this. So I'm waiting for that Inspector General report. If the difficult decision becomes clear that new leadership is required, and that occasionally happens at organizations, then we must have the courage to say so. But that's the process that I'm in right now, is just evaluating.
So let's
wait
for
that. I think that's the right thing. I think that's the right thing to do.
Now, WHRO has embarked on a 2-year initiative to help our veterans here in this area, where we are serving as a convener for conversations about issues that veterans face, and also to provide resources. And I know you have something special from your office for veterans.
I appreciate this opportunity. And you know, the show started out and you said, you know, we cover things from an African-American perspective. I think that's wonderful. And I want to share with you that one of the highlights of my service has been becoming friends with, close to, honoring our Montfort Point Marines, for example, our first African-American Marines. You'll find no more patriotic men than these. They are American treasures. They're getting older now, like my dad at 92. But, you know, when I come home from Washington, occasionally we stop by Arlington. You know, there are no Democratic tombstones. There's no Republican tombstones. There's none identified by ethnicity.
They just say they're soldiers and they're patriots.
It's a sacred, reverential place, all Americans. And so this helps me to know that all Americans, or both parties, all this stuff, we've all got a seat at the table. It's a nice foundation upon which to start a discussion. Anyway, for our Vietnam veterans, and unlike Iraq, unlike Afghanistan, where the country had rightly kind of pivoted and said, wait a minute, whether you support the war or not, these are patriots who are willing to go. You know, we didn't have that mindset with our Vietnam veterans. And some were, these young 18, 19-year-old men and women, they came home, people were not supportive.
They weren't very nice.
So we are deeply honored and excited about a program that we're having from 4 to 6 p.m. on July the 1st at the Virginia Beach Convention Center, specifically for Vietnam veterans. So if you're listening here today, you have a Vietnam veteran in your life, a coworker, a parent, or yourself, let us know. And if you would go to rigell.house.gov, let me spell that last name. It's rigell.house.gov. And let us know. There's a little email places you can sign up there. But we're so excited. Joe Galloway, nationally acclaimed author of We Were Soldiers Once and Young, He agreed. Actually, I thought this is kind of a Hail Mary pass to get him to come. He is our featured speaker.
Oh, fantastic.
So this is all good. He'll be there. That's about the Vietnam experience. And so he's our special guest. And we just so look forward to honoring our Vietnam veterans that day.
That is fantastic. Let's see if we can get some more calls in. Deborah joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Deborah. You're on the air.
Yes, hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mr. Rigell.
Hi, Deborah.
I live in Norfolk, and as both of you know, we're living in the epicenter of the global warming issues, particularly as it pertains to rising waters. And it just seems to me that we really need to do something to reduce our carbon footprint. And I understand that you're making a huge push for jobs that are going to result from more oil and gas exploration off our coast. But I'm just wondering, those are sort of the jobs of the past. It seems to me that the jobs of the future are going to be in wind and solar and some of these other kind of alternative energies. And other states are really going forward with exploring wind energy, particularly off our coast. And I'm just wondering where you stand on that.
Sure.
Okay.
And if you are doing anything to promote that.
Yes,
Thank
Barbara,
you, Deborah. Appreciate it.
It's a great topic, and I'm really happy to discuss this. We've had innovations that were not even conceived. No one really envisioned them. I think as recently as 5 years ago, that have allowed us to harvest more natural gas, for example, which is a very clean burning fuel. And it has sharply reduced energy prices for so many Americans. And I would first say that the folks who are the most that benefit the most, and also are hurt the most by rising energy cost, are working folks. And so for those who are $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, we need to have low energy prices. Now, I support wind. I was thrilled about the $33 million grant off the coast of Virginia. Mm-hmm. But here is the reality. The disparity between a cost per kilowatt hour of wind and the cost per kilowatt hour of natural gas, for example, is so great that if we tried to pass that on directly to consumers, there'd be truly, Deborah, I believe, a revolt. People wouldn't want to see their rates go up that much. But what I support, Deborah, is the research in this area, because you and I are in agreement on this. Our time frame is different, but we're in agreement on principle, and that is we do, over time, need to shift to fully renewable. Mm-hmm. I believe that. Natural gas is not a renewable by definition, nor is oil, because it took millions of years. I'm not a geologist or geophysicist, but I know that I remember from my the classes that this deciduous matter under tremendous pressure, that's how oil is formed. That is not a renewable energy. And when folks say, well, gosh, we've got 200 years, 150 years of energy, I'm going, that's all?
Not a lot of time.
That's all? I'm going, that's all? We need to get on this. So I support the research in wind, but to say that that this is really the path out right now, in all candor, I don't think it is. And there are environmental concerns. The migratory birds that come down the eastern shore, you put these things up, not to be too graphic here, but they're chopping up birds, and they're doing this out in California. I mean, and these things are huge. The wind turbines, they're the size of locomotives right now. These things are 300-400 feet tall. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a benign, friendly, Dutch windmill just slowly turning. No, these things are huge, and you'd need to cover the Atlantic coast with these things because the technology isn't there. That's why I support the research on that, the responsible exploration of the other, as we transition over time to more renewables.
I want to ask you a question. I saw a Black History Month video where you stated that there was a drawing of Martin Luther King on your wall, and you said that he inspires you because he was not afraid to stand alone and that he spoke truth to power. And you've had instances where you've kind of stood alone. So I'm wondering, has that helped you in Washington in terms of being able to be effective?
It has. I think of them as moments of truth. When I supported then Congressmember Dennis Kucinich, I supported his legislation that would get us out of Afghanistan, and he voted for mine. And I got a phone call on the way back from my office from senior leadership. If I mentioned the name, you'd recognize it. Scott, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? I knew why he was calling. He said, you voted for Kucinich's bill. I said, because it's a good bill. The time that I voted for civil contempt for Attorney General Holder, because I believe that was warranted, but I voted against criminal. I was one of 2 Republicans to do so, and what that meant. But I knew, because I listened to both sides on these big issues. I have the Democratic staff members come in, and a lot of times they come in my office and I see them looking around. I know our listeners, most of them can't see me what I'm doing, but I'm looking around the room, because they'll come in and they'll say, we don't often get called to Republicans' offices. I said, well, I don't know how to make a decision of this magnitude without getting both sides. So give me your best shot. Tell me why I should vote this way or that way. Apparently this is news in Washington, and I don't understand it. You know, I'm a business person. I've made a living. Frankly, the business that I was in or am in, it's not all that forgiving. You make a series of bad decisions, you're out of business. And so this whole mindset that we'd have at our organization, I'm sure it's the same here at WHRO. You come in as a team and you say, how can we improve our product? How can we serve our customers? How can we grow our customers? This is so different than Congress, where you go in and half the team is kind of going, well, how can we, pierce the other team's credibility? It's an odd thing, and I'm not quite used to it. And in fact, I hope I never do get used to it.
So let me ask you, we've got about 2 minutes left.
This went so fast.
I know it did. But what would you say then is the most rewarding thing that has happened to you in Washington, and then what's the most disappointing?
Listen.
And I know that's not fair to ask you in 2 minutes.
No, I got it. Listen, part of it is this, is just learning more about our wonderful region. Being from the blessing of the fleet at Cape Charles, meeting with our families of our service members, being here with you, learning. I thought I knew a lot about our community, but it's beautiful and diverse and very wonderful people who love America. The challenging thing, I think that's kind of what it was, is I come home exhausted, not so much from the physical side, Barbara, but from talking with my fellow Americans, not to yield to apathy. This is our biggest threat, Barbara, and I hope the listeners hear this, is that wherever one is on the political spectrum, we must believe that we can shape our future. I believe that. We can get a hold of this hyper-redistricting. We don't have to live with that. And we can find the common ground. And I think part of it is remembering and reflecting that civility is not weakness. Civility is not weakness. This is just what our moms taught us was the right thing, not only at home, but in the public square.
And on that note, we're going to have to say we're out of time.
That did go quick.
Thank you so very, very much for joining us, though.
I enjoyed it.
Congressman Scott Rigell. And that's our show for today. I'm so glad you decided to join us. And thanks to everyone who called in with comments for the Congressman. If you'd like to hear the show again or share it with a friend, please visit anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast of the show. You can also sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming programs. And we'd love it if you would friend us on Facebook. Next week, it's Another View on Health with Dr. Keith Newby. We're talking about asthma and why so many African Americans suffer with this disease. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Show producer Lisa Godley is out today, and we thank Morgan Chase, who produces Hearsay with Kathy Lewis, for stepping in. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Denise Norris answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thanks for listening, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.